7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Welcome into another edition of the Vegas Squares podcast. I am flying solo in the studio. If you've been listening to the last few podcasts, Spike has had surgery, and Token Tony works a 9-to-5 job, so it's tough to get those guys into the studio midweek. But nevertheless, we've got a trusty, replacement. Dave is with us. If you remember Dave from the early episodes, he doesn't take no shit, and he tells it like it is. Dave, what's up, man? It's good to see you. It's been a while. Or good to hear from you. It's been a while.
Well, I'm glad I could be the replacement. So it is good to be back. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of nonsense going on. So I'm sure I have some fantastic views that you're just waiting to chew on.
Well, I can tell you this, and don't sound too proud when you respond, but you were my second choice after, fuck it, I'm just not going to do a podcast this week.
Wow. I'm just going to sit and revel in that for a second.
Yeah, don't get too proud. Don't let that ego start to blow up to your head. So I just want you to know that.
Please.
I kid. Nevertheless, again, welcome to the Vegas Squares podcast. We are on 12 Ounce Sports Radio here. You can catch us every Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday on 12 Ounce Sports Radio. You can catch us. Also, all of our podcasts are available at vegassquares.com. Just click the podcast tab and listen. And obviously, you can interact with us on Twitter at Vegas Squares, or shoot us an email, vegassquares@gmail.com. All right, now that we got all the bills out of the way, let's kind of dive right into it. Obviously, the topics du jour, or of week, I don't know what week is in French, topics du week, is the AFC and NFC championship games. And depending on whether you're a fan of any of the four teams or just a fan of football, you have some very polarizing reactions to both games, whether it be, rigged, set up, stupidity, cheating, or just on the other side, how about you all just shut the hell up? So, Dave, your just initial thoughts on championship weekend.
I'm going to go with chaotic. And that chaos just centers around what the NFL puts in place that causes this. So, we're out of the years of where two teams just go out on the field and play against each other. It's now we have all the interruptions, and all the replays, and then all the squabbling afterwards just causes the next games and stuff to probably be handled differently and stuff. And it's just the NFL being the NFL, I think, is what it's come to at this point in time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think and I've been saying this for a long time across this podcast and previous endeavors as far in the sports world of anybody who wants to hear my opinion, is that the NFL is leaning less towards a sport and more towards the WWE. It's a soap opera, it's entertainment, and it's a business. And I understand that while it's still a game played on the field, when there are millions or billions at stake, it almost feels like it needs to be handled. And I don't know if a fan of the game who believes in its purest form can wrap their head around that.
Well, they can. I mean, it's evident that the NFL has actually squeezed out the fan, the family aspect of this. What built the whole aura of the NFL is gone. You're right. It's become more of an entertainment. If there's not chaos, if there's not something from week to week that drives the media, that drives the talking heads, that drives the coaches and everyone, with things that really are not on the field issues, then they're not happy. And, so we got what we got last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It seems every week and every week of the playoffs, or as the momentum builds, we have topics of controversy. I mean, whether one person wants to believe it's controversial, one person wants to believe, it is what it is. And obviously we'll get into each of the games and the situations that obviously are the topics of the week. But it just feels like, every week for as long as I can remember the last few years, every week there's always a talking point. And whether it's a good talking point or a bad talking point, I mean, you have scandals as far back as Bountygate and Spygate and Deflategate, and you have week to weeks. As last year you had the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end, I forget his name, escaping me. Did he catch the ball against the Patriots? Maybe, maybe not. Then you have, did Dez Bryant catch the ball in the playoff game against the Packers? It seems it's every week there seems to be a crucial play that defines that slate of games. And going back to it, I just don't feel like these situations are natural.
Well, they're not natural, and actually, it's a rolling soap opera, because all the things that you just mentioned happen, but we also, because of all the news media outlets that we have nowadays with the internet, the TV station, I mean, there's so many minutes of broadcast time in one sort of medium or another that have to be filled. We have to try to outdo the next guy. So now, not only are those things topics, but now it's the internal strife that goes on with teams and the bickering between players and coaches and ownership and stuff. Now we get drawn into that drama, into that soap opera part, which just fuels the whole big, 30,000-foot picture of what the NFL has evolved to.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, if you can wrap your head around those facts, the NFL is still a game for you to say. Because I've always said this on the podcast, I believe sports are controlled. All four major sports, all the way down to anything. I believe if you're betting on it, or their money is large amounts of money are at stake, they're not just going to let the natural progression happen, because ratings and money are on one side could be exponentially greater than ratings and money for another thing. I mean, we saw it when Kansas City and San Francisco made the World Series a few years ago. It was one of the lowest rated World Series of all time. And last year when Boston and LA made the World Series, it was one of the higher rated World Series of this millennium. So, I mean, it obviously matters. And again, I'm not saying that the NFL or any other major sports completely dials in to, again, use the R word, rig, but I believe there are key factors in not only on the field and off the field that can kind of drive these things. And like I said, I don't know if that's just from moving to Vegas I've started to see it, or started to just believe this, and maybe I just put on a tinfoil hat. I don't know, but that's what I believe. I've always said.
Basically, you're saying that the NFL has burner cell phones and they're making these anonymous phone calls and saying, it will probably be in your best interest to lose today.
No, not only that, and a lot of people obviously have the counter argument is, how can you rig a sport when there's so many people involved? And again, I don't think you can completely rig it, but I think you can push. I mean, again, all right, let's dive. Let me use an example. The one that kind of set me into this motion was, I used to bet a lot of basketball when I moved here, and I still followed basketball. I don't follow NBA as much anymore, actually, if at all. It was amazing to me how, where I would see a total land, and as in-play betting started to become a thing, you'd be able to obviously bounce around. The total obviously bounced around. It wasn't a fixed number like it used to be before in-play betting. And it was amazing to me how professional athletes could go from missing shots for 8 straight minutes to then go and they can't miss shots for 6. Something seems weird about it. And then you have questionable calls. You have the stars getting the calls of the LeBron James, the James Hardens. They're getting whistles blown before the actual contact even happens. And that's actually, referees have come out and said, I just assume that a foul is going to happen, so I blow the whistle. I mean, it's amazing. But going back to football, let's get into the first game. I mean, the first game of the day was the NFC Championship. And yes, I believe that a call of this magnitude did alter the game. Whether the ratings you believe are going to be better for, I think all 4 of those teams would have produced great ratings, but I believe the Boston and LA markets create the bigger matchup ratings, in my opinion. And I'm not saying, like I said, you and I may differ on this call. I think it was an egregious non-call based on the technology that we have, and I believe it swayed the game, although there were other factors that could have been done or not done that obviously led to this situation, but just in that one moment, I believe it was an egregious non-call that inappropriately shaped that game.
Well, on the call part, yeah, I'll get to that. Back a few steps here to what you were saying, just using your example of the NBA and stuff. I don't even think you have to assume that any further than just watching the athletes, in quotations, themselves playing the game. You put a college game up on one screen and split it to an NBA screen, and you watch the difference in the style of play. The NBA guys are just out there, look at me, I'm just walking up and down the court. And then, like you say, all of a sudden, here we are trying to rack up points, or here one team's trying to catch up from a 20, 30-point deficit, and then it goes back and forth. So I totally agree with you that there's some aspect of that game that is being controlled on the professional side versus the non-professional college side. And I think when you put games side by side, you can totally tell the difference in all sports. Now, back to your egregious call. I think it was a great call.
Of course you do.
I really did. Of course I do. Look, I watched this, and I've watched all of the replays that I can possibly find out on the internet, all the angles and everything. And trust me, there's a million of them because we now are camera laden in sports. But to my view of this that whole play was that when he got run over, that ball was equal, if not in front of him. Now, I don't think he was a defenseless player either because it was within probably 4 foot or so of him, and he was making a play toward it. And I think, okay, it was a high hit, but I don't think it was just a high hit. I think it was a full body run over in which in very slow motion you see the Rams player turn his head to the left so the crown of his head would not hit the helmet of the New Orleans player. Having said that, when you put that in real-time speed, I think it was a good call, which gets back to what I've told you for years. We do not need instant replay in sport. We need to allow for human error. And we need to because the players aren't perfect. So why should the officials be held to a standard that the players aren't?
Sure.
I mean, come on.
I can get that, but I think that because we do have that technology and the NFL has decided to use it in, select scenarios, I don't agree with the fact that some plays are, able to be reviewed and some aren't. And like I said, I'm okay with not having replay at all and adding the human element, and because that's the way the game was played up until, I don't know when exactly instant replay was put into the game, but I'm guessing probably around 2003 or 4 or 5. Point being is that the game was played without it for so long, and, the game went on. Some people got screwed, some people didn't.
It did. And people enjoyed it. And instead of, like we're talking about, you have this media soap opera going on. The soap opera was all between the fans talking to each other at the water cooler the next day or out to dinner and stuff. That's how we've evolved to this nonsense. But back to the call. Here's what's going to happen. Right now, that was not a reviewable call. Next year, it will be. So we've just added another stoppage in play, time-consuming, review to a list that already is out of control in a game that they've been trying to speed up for television reasons.
Correct.
It's counterproductive.
I agree with that. And on the flip side, the college game has this, it's essentially it's not pass interference, but it's essentially they review targeting. So you're right. And since this targeting play has been implemented in college football, the game has slowed down tremendously. College football games are taking upwards of 4 hours at this point. Now, college football is a little bit more fun to watch, but...
Let me talk real quick.
Okay.
Targeting, all right? You brought this up. What is the overall aspect of football? A guy runs with a ball, and a guy targets him. Every play is targeting.
Yes,
I'm targeting someone every play.
I understand what you're saying with that. And I don't necessarily disagree with the premise of it, because I've always been a component that the NFL is getting softer and softer and softer. However, my point being is that you're right. The NCAA reviews virtually everything, and now their games are 4 to 4.5 hours long. Whereas the NFL, you said it correctly, they are attempting to shorten the length of the game, and by doing this, the problem is when you implemented instant replay, you implemented the need for 10 times as many more cameras, which then gives the fan at home 10 times as many more angles. And, of course, we're all armchair quarterbacks at this point in our careers. And, now that I can see a lot more, again, 25 years ago, you look at that call, and again, I watched it in real time. I was like, oh, that was bang, bang. But when they slowed it down, again, I believe it was pass interference. However, the fact of the matter is, let's get back even before that. Let's take it back. You can make the case that they should have never been in that situation based on many, many factors in this game. First, they had a 13-0 lead in the first quarter. I mean, yes, teams blow leads all the time, but nevertheless, they had a double-digit lead. They had a 2-possession lead in the first quarter. Also, fast forward to that same drive, first down and 10, Sean Payton's throwing an incomplete pass. The Rams have one timeout, and I believe there was a little over 2 minutes left at that point. Why the fuck are you throwing on first and third down in a drive where you should be killing clock, trying to get down to the minimal amount of time, use the Rams timeouts, and then kick the field goal so that Jared Goff, a virtually, he's not a rookie, obviously, he's in his third year, but virtually a young, inexperienced quarterback having to go across the field in his third playoff game of his career with no timeouts. I mean, the guy's not Tom Brady. There's a difference between leaving Tom Brady 45 seconds and no timeouts and Jared Goff 45 seconds and 0 timeouts. I think Sean Payton mismanaged this game and now has a scapegoat for his mismanagement of the game.
Well, I agree totally, and that pass play, the errant call pass play, is a total contradiction of his argument that you cost me the game. And you're exactly right. Why were you throwing it? You were throwing it for a touchdown that was going to leave even more time on the clock. So now you're telling me because you didn't get a call, but we were going to stop on the 1, and then we were going to run it down, and then we were going to kick a field goal. Bullshit. You were not. You contradicted yourself all through this argument over this call. And the bottom line is, it's not the call, and it's not even the mismanagement up to the call. It's the 1 minute after the field goal that your team could not stop that team in 100 yards in a minute.
Correct.
To retain the win.
And
so you're using everything as a scapegoat for your inability and your defense's inability to stop the other team. That's all this boils down to. You're diverting the issue.
Right.
And if somebody's defensive guy needs fired, it needs to be yours.
And that's where I was going to go next is post egregious call. You still had to stop the Rams. Again, they had the one timeout at that point. They marched down the field, kicked I believe, 45-yard field goal to tie it up, which, again, in this day and age, field goals are no guarantee. Just ask Cody Parkey of the Bears. And not only that, you then received the overtime kickoff and promptly turned the ball over. Well, again, the defense did a fantastic job for the Rams of getting in his face and forcing the turnover. Point being is you still had an opportunity to win this game, and you didn't. And I understand. Again, it's a word called adversity. Things aren't always going to go your way. Shit call. Again, you think it's a good call. We totally disagree. So I'm going to speak in the manner of disagreeing with you. Totally terrible calls happen in sports. You have to be able to rebound from it, and they didn't. They let it consume them for the rest of the short period of the game.
So here's my question. If you do not have instant replay in the sport, period, and that call happens, what's the mindset after that? Because I already know the answer. Back in the day, the game would have went on. The thinking would have not dwelled on that play. They would have went on. But nowadays, it's more standing on the sideline, whining at the officials. Well, why aren't you reviewing that? Well, go review that. We'll call up to the head office. Blah, blah. And they get consumed in that aspect that, like you say, replays allowable on certain things it's not, but they get so consumed in why can't we look at that? The game continues to go on. They've lost total focus. So I think in that aspect, replay has not kept them as sharp throughout games as it should, because they dwell too much on things that happened, the adversities, as you say, and they don't adapt and they don't move on from that point. They're still chewing on it. Well, why didn't they do it? Oh, wow, why didn't they review it? Why didn't you go over to your little screen over there and take 3 or 4 minutes so everyone could go out and get a beer and a hot dog? Why? You know? And and that was the result of it. Exactly the result of it.
Imagine Sean Payton's post-game press conference if they'd have won that game. He could have come out and said, look, despite the adversity we faced, we went past it, we did our job, we got the win, we're going to the Super Bowl. Instead, like you said, I believe I never thought about that. That's a good take. I never thought about the NFL and players and coaches almost using replay as a crutch, to say, oh, that's going to get reviewed, that's going to get overturned. Maybe, not always. We've seen plenty of calls over the last 15 years that you're like, oh, that's definitely a catch, or he was definitely in bounds, and they don't overturn it, or they do overturn it when you're so sure that it was supposed to stand. Things happen, people get it wrong, and even with replay, sometimes we still get it wrong, and that you're right. And teams, players, coaches, fan bases are using replay as a crutch when sometimes, again, it doesn't always go your way. And it sometimes goes against you. You've got to be able to move on and refocus. And I don't think that whole city at any point in that the rest of that game was able to refocus. And it's amazing how you're right. And in this society, the story always seems to be in the losing locker room, or the story always seems to be with the person who can yell the loudest. And I don't want to get into politics or communities or anything, but it always seems like the story that everybody wants to pay attention to is who can scream the loudest.
Well, and that's always going to be the loser, because, as you say, the loser always has an axe to grind, a crutch to lean on, a scapegoat to point a finger at, and that's where the news is. That's where the sound bites come from. Who wants to go to the happy locker room? Yeah, I mean, they're just dancing around, drinking, and they're jocks, getting in the showers with the girl reporters. Oh, that's a good time.
Hey-o.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's no fun.
That's true.
Let's go over and hear the bitch. There's where the news is, because that's going to create controversy. That's going to be fodder for the next stupid rule that the next professional sport comes out with to try to overcome those sort of situations. Here's what instant replay is trying to do. It's trying to create a perfect situation and a perfect environment out of an imperfect environment. Because if sports was perfect, quarterbacks would throw it 100%. Pitchers would strike out every batter. Every batter would hit a home run. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but you're trying to create something that makes a policing action of that sport perfect. And at the speed of which it has moved and will move, it's not. And I think that has to be part of the game.
I agree with that, because you're
right.
Look
at the officials. The officials get at least 90+% of their calls in all sports correct.
I would even say higher.
Probably. Okay. We're paying, multi-millions of dollars to hitters that are batting 30%, 33%, 34%. Quarterbacks that are throwing maybe 60%, in the mid-50s.
Mm-hmm.
So we got officials calling 90+%, and we're giving them shit to the point that we have to put a camera on every freaking line and stop the play every 5 minutes to see in super slow-mo. It's just stupid. Stop. It's stupid.
Yeah, no, I got no issue with that. You're right. I mean, like you said, if every athlete was perfect, there would not be a need for officials.
Exactly.
There'd be a touchdown every play, a home run every play. I mean, how do you do that one? If a batter hits a home run every time and a pitcher strikes out a batter every time, how does that work?
Exactly. But to the point, I mean, it's not perfect. Pitchers make mistakes. Guys hit home runs.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks make mistakes. People intercept from the other team. It boils down to sports has lost the simplicity of the whole idea, which is your X number of guys need to be better than my X number of guys on any given day, and that's reflected in the amount of points that we generate.
I think the best analogy would be we pay hockey players millions of dollars to make 7 to 9% of their shots.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, they fail 90% of the time.
And I don't think in sports that there's any more variables interfering with those players than there is interfering with those officials, to the point that we are at this level giving officials this much shit and judging them constantly. And here's the problem. This really is going to be my X factor for the Super Bowl game. I would not want to be on that officiating crew going into that stadium.
Right.
Talking about being a microscope, talking about in your mind having to know what used to be a routine call now in your mind through split seconds has to become should I, would I, should I, blah, blah, blah. It's going to hurt the game. It's already hurting the game. But, I mean, in general, it's hurting the game.
Well, not only that, I mean, we have most throughout the regular season, officials throw flags with just, they're just throwing them like they're hotcakes throughout most of the regular season. And all I hear is fans complaining, there's too many flags. That wasn't a penalty. Why are you throwing penalties on this? And then we have a key spot, that dictates a game, and there's no penalty called. And all of a sudden now the fans are outraged that there's not a flag. You can't have it both ways.
Well, look, when you go to a game, maybe other than baseball, but even baseball, you want to see the game just progressively move on. Just keep it moving. Just keep it moving. That's all I want.
Well, football and baseball are already pretty boring games to start with, especially live.
Yeah. But the breaks that you have are part of the game. So if someone's taking a timeout, I know it's part of the game. I'm good with that,
Right.
If the teams are changing positions on the field, it's part of the game. I know that. But when you're stopping the damn play to go do video reviews and challenge stuff, to me, it's not part of the game. It shouldn't be part of the game. And you're stopping it. You're stopping, in my mind, you're stopping the flow of the players more than anything.
Momentum, yeah.
So no matter what team you're rooting for, it's hurting us,
All right.
And we go back to video. Let's go to the other game. The best call on that game was the Edelman. Did he touch it? Didn't he touch it?
Oh, that was fantastic. I mean, it was so amazing. In real time, I'm like, oh, fuck. How do you miss that?
It. And honestly, he should have been called for touching it for being stupid enough to put himself in that position.
Well, that's the thing. He didn't touch it, but to do that, yeah, you're right.
I mean, really. But look at the time that was spent on that.
Mm-hmm. That was close. That was incredibly close. But you're right. In the days of no instant replay, he touched it. We move on. Shit happens.
Exactly. Whether he did or not, it was close enough to be your stupid for being there anyway.
Right.
That's your punishment.
I gotta say, I was still shocked that after all that he did not touch the ball. It's pretty amazing how close the ball got to him without actually touching him. He was right on it too. He is waving his hands. I did not touch the ball, and I'm like, what do you mean you didn't touch the ball? And then all of a sudden, the replay, I'm like, oh shit, he did not touch the ball.
But back to our point a few seconds ago. Now you have Kansas City, who is dwelling on that call and taking them out of their game focus.
Yeah.
Now, granted, things almost went their way.
But let's move from a non-call in the Saints game to a call that happened that shouldn't have happened, and that's the roughing the passer penalty when I forget the defensive lineman's name, put his hand. What looked to be, he swung his hand down and the hand hit Brady's chest versus hitting him in the face mask, which would have been an obvious penalty. But based on the referee's angle, he looked like he hit him in the face mask, so the penalty was called. Obviously, with replay, we obviously saw at home that did not happen, and I'm sure that the referee, once he finally saw the play, realized, oh, I made a bummer. But at the same time, like you said, where one wasn't called, here's one that was missed that was called. Things are going to happen. I mean, referees cannot cover every square inch of a field. They're not surveillance cameras.
Well, and I'll tell you why you make that call. You make that call not for that call specifically, but for the future calls. Because if you let that call go saying he was just on the brink of touching him, then you put the thought in the player's mind that, oh, well, I can swing as close as I want.
Without hitting, right.
So some calls set up future calls. And I would say that's one of them. Yeah, he had a bad angle, and from where he was behind the quarterback, and the way his head did move, it looked like he hit him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have easily put a finger through that face mask in the eye or whatever by doing that. So I think that call, whether that specific call was correct or not, I think that's a good call for future endeavors for defensive linemen, seeing how far they can get or how close they can get to a quarterback's head. Now, let's go back to the 70s. That wouldn't have been a non-issue.
That would, yeah.
Exactly. How many times did Terry Bradshaw have his freaking head slapped by Deacon Jones and almost knocked across the field, but got up and kept playing his career?
Yeah.
These kind of calls don't need to be made because we're protecting people too much. When do we stop protecting them too much, short of putting a 2 or 3 foot circle around them that you can't enter?
Well, I would actually give a little kudos to Brady. I'm thinking maybe he sold that a little bit too.
Well,
whether advertently or inadvertently, he did touch the face mask. You're right. It was. I would say, for all intents and purposes, he mostly whiffed. But you're right. I feel like the hand coming in front of the face caused Brady to flinch, and I believe inadvertently. Again, tip of the cap, kudos to Brady, knowing the rules. I mean, whether or not you agree with the rules, you play by the rules, and you know the rules going into the game. And I believe, if you want to all this talk about how the Patriots bend the rules, this would be one I actually may believe. I think Brady may have cocked his head or moved his head in an attempt to get that flag.
And, you're right. You play with what you're given.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, we're giving them too many things that really are not part of the game. That's just, I
agree with that. Now, like I said, if this football game was played in the 80s, like you said, we would not be talking about this because that would be nothing compared to the love taps that Deacon Jones gave Terry Bradshaw. Absolutely, I understand that. My point being is this is the world we live in. There's camera angles, thousands of camera angles through every stadium, and this is what we have to deal with. Now, my beef with this specific game is now with Pat Mahomes never getting the ball, everyone wants to change the overtime rules, which, again, I'm fine with changing the overtime rules, but it's not because of this one situation. I believe the overtime rules should be changed, but I honestly also believe that if the Chiefs won the toss in overtime and marched down the field and scored on the Patriots defense, I believe because everybody hates the Patriots so much, they would have said, well, your team should have played defense, which is exactly what Patriots fans are saying. Look, Kansas City has a defense. Play some. You don't like the rules? These are the rules that exist right now. Win the toss or play defense. Just because it didn't go your way, now we're using the crutch of we need to change the overtime rules because Mahomes didn't get the ball in overtime. Well, tough shit.
And you're supporting what I said a few minutes ago about the simplicity of the game. Your 11 guys need to be better than my 11 guys.
Yep.
And here's the next time you have to do it. And, oh, by the way, if you, through all that time, end up equal, then you know what? sudden death. Stop with overtime. Go back to what it used to be called sudden death. I hate the way college does theirs. It's like having a bunch of 6-year-olds playing baseball and you give trophies to all the losers. Everybody gets a chance. Everybody gets a chance to win. Why? I mean, in college you've got games going 3 and 4 quarters over. All you're doing is setting up for people to get hurt.
Right. I don't agree with playing college rules overtime.
Everything should be sudden death. First person to score, first person to cross the plate, first person. Well, basketball's a little different, but basketball would be the only one that should be set to a time limit. Everybody else sudden death. Now, if you want to play the equivalent of 4 quarters with no score, knock your freaking self out. I really say the law of averages say that's not going to happen. But why do I go down and score and now I got to go defend myself? I just won. It makes no sense. And again, it's the NFL, like you say, and most of these sports trying to milk it for all it's worth and keep this chaotic, soap opera-ish thing going to give people something to talk about and keep them in the forefront till the next game and then the next game.
Well, yes, and I agree with that. However, I actually do believe it should be a 15-minute period and whoever wins at the end of that. I don't mind sudden death, but at the same time, if you're going to have it, it is tough to say that. I mean, a coin toss is 50-50. So you're going to win that, obviously 1 out of every 2 times. The tough situation here is that, again, if your defense, Kansas City defense is all world historically bad. And it's tough to say that, once they won the toss, I had a feeling the game was over. Kansas City was not stopping the New England Patriots. I do believe that in football, the tempo and flow of a game goes more than sudden. I don't know. I don't agree with necessarily sudden death. But at the same time, those aren't the rules right now.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. College, I think, is.
I don't know what the rules are.
And I don't think the college way they do it, you're right. I don't think that's safe. And we're all about safety of the game, and I think that is. The more football you play, the more you subject yourself to injury. That's just fact. So I agree with you on that as far as college football. Remember, what was it, Texas A&M and LSU, where they play 8 overtimes the few months ago or something like that? And there was it was like 75-74.
Yeah, 2 games. A little over 2 games.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. But on the pro side, I think it boils down to what Vince Lombardi would say, what the great coaches would say. When you go into overtime, it's gut check time.
Sure.
That's why it should be sudden death.
And again, I don't have a problem
with
it.
Now all or nothing.
And I don't have a problem with that because those are the rules, and I have no issue with that. I don't agree with them. Again, I believe a period should be played.
Well, and they're really not the rules because now it's if you score a touchdown, the game's over. If the defense scores any way possible, the game's over. But if you kick a field goal, well, the other team gets it. Well, what the hell's the difference between 3 points and 7 points?
Yeah.
It only takes one team to be better than the other team.
Yeah, you're right.
So why the hell does it freaking matter?
Yeah, all it takes is one. You're right. All it takes is 1 point to win a game. So if you're going to play sudden death, a field goal or a touchdown, yeah, I agree with you. You should have gone all or nothing in your first attempt to revitalize overtime or revise overtime, because again, I am in the camp that believes it should be a full period, but at the same time, I'm okay with the rules the way they were. Yeah, you win the toss. Obviously, winning coin tosses is not a key aspect in football as far as skill, but if you win the toss, oh shit, you lost the toss. Now you got to go play defense. And the Rams played defense, and the Chiefs did not. The Rams turned the ball over, breezed through a pick, and they went down and kicked the field goal and won the game. They're on the Super Bowl. The Chiefs did not play defense. They let Rex Burkhead walk into the end zone, and now they are in the Pro Bowl.
Well, here's my thing with the coin toss too. Why do we have a coin toss in overtime? Why? Look, when we play baseball, we have extra innings. We just continually progress with this team, this team, this team, this team, this team, this team, this team. Okay? Why in football, why do we not just have one coin toss at the beginning of the game? If you elect to receive, then you receive. Then you kick off the second half. If there's an overtime, then you receive. Think how that would change the complexity of those decisions.
Well,
So
I think
instead of give and take, why are we having a separate coin toss for overtime? It should be the opposite of what the halftime start was.
okay,
Which would actually be
so
what the beginning of the game was.
well, then it would probably make coaches not defer anymore. It would actually make them
Exactly.
choose to
Exactly.
receive to start the game. I see what you're saying. So basically, it's a
It just adds
new
into the thing
second
of
half. I guess
basketball.
what you're saying. I would argue that you
Yeah,
could just
absolutely.
make overtime an extension. But I would say you could make overtime an extension to say, okay, look, if the clock, well, maybe not. That's not. Never mind. I'd like to take that back. I'd like to retract that from the record.
Sounds like an it.
Well, the thing is you can't do that, because if a team gets all the way down to like the 30 and then decides that they want to the time runs out, then they don't just start overtime with the ball at the 30. That was a terrible idea.
Look, if you really want to know my feeling, send your best 4 players out from each team, and they fight to the death. And then the winner gets the ball. Let's really make this entertaining. Come on, I mean, you want beer sales,
But
give them something to buy.
The point remains whether you agree or disagree with a rule at any given time. It's the rule at that point. Now,
At that point in time, it
again,
is.
I don't like the way overtime is set up. I agree that both teams should get the ball, but not in the way that it's constructed. So that's why I am a fan of having a complete period, and whoever the leader is at the period, and basically continuous OT. The way, like you said, the way basketball does it. Whoever leads at the end of overtime, that's fine, because it's not a sport where it's not a sport where possession changes constantly like hockey, and it's not a sport where you can clearly mark the change in attempts to score like baseball. And it's more closer to a sport that can score back and forth like basketball. Basketball has a continuous overtime period, whereas baseball, you have clearly marked innings. This team bats, now this team bats. And again, both teams in extra innings get a chance to win the game, unlike football.
All right, under your scenario, running a full quarter clock where everyone gets a chance, okay, I guess my concern there is that it becomes too conservative. Overtime becomes conservative. You lose the sense of urgency, because now that we have 15 minutes. So we're not going to, if we get the ball first, we're not going to take that shot. We're not going to make that sense of urgency that we need to score now. So you're going to see what I think is going to be more boring play in overtime,
And I'm okay.
more conservative play.
I'm okay with that, because a lot of times now with
I'm not.
well, look at it. If you watch regular.
I'm going to tell you what I'm not.
Hold on, I'll let you get there.
Half hour.
If you watch regular season football, it's a 10-minute overtime period, and the team who gets the ball first, usually, if their offense is clicking, runs the ball down for like 7 or 8 minutes. They try to go on a long drive because, 1, they keep the ball. 2, if they don't score, the worst they can do is tie, because they give the other team as little chance as possible to put points on the board. Overtime right now in the regular season is already conservative. The difference is that the rules are so much geared towards offense, it's hard to... And again, I feel for the Chiefs. I understand. My beef really isn't with the Chiefs not being able to stop. My beef is the fact that every fan now wants to change the rule because Mahomes never got the ball, when I firmly believe if Mahomes got the ball, drove down and scored a touchdown, people hate the Patriots so much, they'll be like, fuck you, I don't want to change the rules. It's sheer bias at this point. It's not an actual call for change.
We will have to agree to disagree on this overtime, because here's my thing. Either if I'm sitting at home, I've already been sitting here for 3.5 hours, I don't want to sit there for another hour. I want the game to be over with. Okay, I'm done. My attention span's done. If I'm at the game, I've been there for 3.5 hours. I've been around a bunch of nonsense fans, whether my fans or the other team's fans. They shut the concessions down in the middle of the fourth quarter. So if I'm there another 15, playing minutes, which is another 35 to 40 minutes of regular time, there's nothing for me to get to enjoy during that period. I want to go home in the damn game.
Okay, fair, but by
We're
that...
dragging things on. We're dragging things on for senseless reasons other than I go back to my sixth graders and, we have to give everyone a fair chance. No, we don't.
I understand that. No, but by your logic, what you just explained, whether you're sitting on the couch or at the game, it sounds like you would probably prefer a situation more closer to college overtime with a slight change. These teams start the ball at... No, I understand that, but no, think about this. Teams start at whatever, pick a yard line, I don't care. But teams start there. Each team gets a possession. If you score, you have to go for 2 immediately. You can still kick field goals if you want, fourth down, you get stopped. You can still kick the field goals like they do in college. But immediately starting with the first possession, you have to go for 2.
I don't even have a problem with that because that's not a given.
Right.
That's, and a field goal isn't really a given, especially with the NFL moving it back where it did.
Yeah.
More often than not it is. But, okay, if you're going to do that, at least put something in there that does not cream puff the game and make it drag on and on and on past its regular playing time to the point where you're losing the fans' interest.
That's fair. And I think football's still popular enough that it's hard to lose it. The more football, I don't know, loses a fan's interest. More baseball, yeah, probably. It's a more boring sport. More basketball, yeah, probably. The players just get ridiculously tired. I could always take more hockey. That's a given. But my point being is that I think what people are most upset about, trying to see the other side of an argument. I think what people most are upset about is things aren't being settled on a football field when it's predetermined by a coin toss. And you know what? In some years, the Chiefs' defense is not going to be bad. This year, they were all-world bad. Some years, they may not feel as bad putting their defense on the field. This year, they were probably nervous. And again, like I said...
You say bad, but they were playing a game that was going to put them in a Super Bowl. So how bad can they be?
They're bad.
You see my point there?
Statistically,
I know what you're saying.
The reason they were almost going to the Super Bowl is because their offense scored 35 points a game.
You're using a bad defense as an excuse for a game that was to put them into the Super Bowl, which is supposed to technically be the 2 best teams.
It was two great offenses, one average defense, and one terrible defense. The Chiefs. If the Chiefs had an average offense, they would have been nowhere near the Super Bowl. But because they had such an explosive electric offense, they scored 38, 40 points a game, which led them to the AFC Championship. And the thing is the emphasis in the NFL is now on offensive football, which I'm fine with. But
it's an all sport. Points. People want to see points. They want to hear the bell ring.
Yeah. No, and I have no problem with that, and I get it. I think that the fans' beef, again, I believe it's unjustified simply because Brady walked down the field and scored a touchdown. Again, I believe if Mahomes walked down the field and scored a touchdown, there would be less quote-unquote controversy because most people just want to see the Patriots lose.
Now, I refresh my memory. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. Who did the opening kickoff for that game? I don't remember who kicked.
The Patriots got the ball first.
Okay, so it would have ended up in my scenario in overtime. The Chiefs would have kicked off anyway.
Right, according to your suggestion.
Yeah. So you know what? Then in the previous 60 minutes, maybe you should have busted your ass a little better. Well,
that's a whole other argument. You're absolutely right.
Oh, I know it is, but I'm just saying, in the scheme of things,
Well, and it all boils down to one thing. If D Ford lines up on sides, they're going to the Super Bowl. They're in the Super Bowl.
But why did that official not tell him?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Andy Reid, come on, dude, really?
That's an amazing attempt at
first of
placing
all,
the blame on somebody else.
You fire your defensive coordinator. Now you're asking the officials why they didn't tell your player that he was too stupid to stay behind the imaginary line. And he was not just over the line. He was a good yard.
If he was wearing a different jersey, I thought he might have been an offensive lineman.
He would have been a flanker.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it's like.
He
dude,
was so egregiously offsides. It was so bad.
And if I'm not mistaken, like these players do, like receivers and stuff do, they will check up to the line and they will hand signal the official, are they okay? Or they're the ones on the line, or they're the ones off the line on the offense. But you can hand signal the official, and he'll tell you, but it's not his place to
he's not going to actively go, hey, D, back up.
Get back, or I'm going to have to give you a flag that's going to cost your team the game. I mean, and you know what? I'm embarrassed for Andy Reid for even coming out and saying that. That's childish beyond just anything I can think of to even bring that up, especially on the heels of these other calls that have more of a legit argument, to bring that up. I'm like, oh my God, we are just picking. And this gets back to my point. When you're nitpicking stupid shit like that, it's going to be in the officiating's head in the Super Bowl game. And it's going to be a difference. Maybe not a big difference, maybe not a noticeable difference, but there are going to be calls and non-calls that are going to be a result of the pressure being put on because of this nonsense that the NFL's letting get out to the media, out to the open, and out to the general public to be debated.
Well, the reason they do that is because now with social media, everybody has a voice. So it's the ultimate.
And back to the first of our conversation, you hit it on the nose when you said that originally. You're right. That's what they want, entertainment.
They want you to be entertained, whether it's positively or negatively. You're still going to watch the Super Bowl. You're still going to watch Week 1, 2, 3, etc. You're going to watch until you stop watching, and they'll find out very quickly that you're not. Again, the biggest offender, I guess, of the eyeballs turning away from the NFL was the protest, the kneeling. And they saw maybe not a huge dent, but they saw a dent, and look how quick they addressed it.
Well, I won't say quick, but it finally.
Well,
after
it took 1 year.
Yeah.
It took 1 year, and they saw it because it takes a while to get data. Once they saw the data, they said, "All right, look. I mean, I would say for what they did, and again, I don't want to get into politics, for what they allowed to happen." And then when they finally got the feedback from it, I think between getting the feedback and where we are now, they shut it down pretty quick.
Yeah.
So let's we got about 4 or 5 more minutes left in the podcast. Let's move on to the Super Bowl and just get your initial thoughts. I mean, obviously you have Pats Rams in Atlanta. The spread is 2.5 in favor of the Patriots. Total 58 right now.
The 2.5 is your town being very generous.
It opened.
My thought on
it opened up at a pick'em and it moved quick.
Yeah, well, it didn't move far enough. Here's my thought on this, and it is what it is. You have the youngest coach
ever
to be in a Super Bowl ever, which means his experience level is very low. You have a second-year quarterback who does well, puts up a lot of points, but has not been in this arena. His experience level is low. You have Bill Belichick. Checkmate. Game's over. There's nothing that this kid's going to put in a game plan that has never been done, seen, or attacked by Bill Belichick. You're not playing Tom Brady in this game. You're playing the coach. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you right now, it's not. You're done, dude. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you're going to throw and there's no wrinkle that you're going to think up that he hasn't already thought of for you and addressed. So as long as the key things that need to happen is as long as New England executes, as long as they get rid of the stupid penalties, and as long as they handle Donald and Sue on the front line, I think the rest of this game takes care of itself.
Fair.
I know New England secondary's weak. I'm looking at a 35-20 score.
Okay.
And the Patriots take another trophy home. That's where I'm at on this. I mean, I can't make this a competitive game.
Well, just because the spread says
can't.
so doesn't mean it's always right. So I can see where your head's at in that spot. Now let me ask you this: regardless of outcome, let's just say, like you said, let's say that it goes your way with 35-20, whatever the score is, the Patriots win. Sean McVay is a pretty up-and-coming young coach with a great offensive mind. A lot of people say that this, if managed properly with the talent around, him and Goff could be the next Bill and Tom. Is there anything that you see that supports that or debunks that?
Ask me on your podcast after the game.
Okay.
Because I want to see, well, and I'm not saying that being asked, I'm saying that because I want to see how they handle the pressure of their first Super Bowl.
Okay.
Their first Super Bowl individually and their first Super Bowl as a team, and see if the cohesiveness is there, or do they panic and fall apart, or is it 35-14, and with a minute left, they're still pounding and score that final touchdown, knowing that it doesn't sway the outcome other than possibly on the Vegas boards.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see how they react to this, because I'm telling you right now, they're going to get shit thrown at them from New England that they've never seen, that they're not going to find in past tapes. And you know as well as I know, Belichick is just a god. I mean, he will come up with stuff and schemes that will shut them down if executed properly. Now, I'm not saying, again, we get back to this, it's not 100%.
Well, players got to play.
But you look at a New England team that has 36 players on that team that have been in this environment of a Super Bowl, and you tell me who's going to be the most relaxed, who's going to operate the schemes most efficiently, and who is going to approach this just as it's another game versus the wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, I've got all these interviews, I've got all these pictures, we've got to get a game plan to stop Tom Brady. I'm telling you, McVay is, at this point, I would say, is so overwhelmed. Trying to stay focused is probably becoming a very hard thing for him to do right now, to stay focused just on the game with all the other things that surround it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only into the middle of week one. You haven't even got
ramps up starting
to
Monday.
handle all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the pressure totally lies on them. You know. So back to your question, I would defer to after the game to actually answer that, to see how they handle themselves in this. But hey, if they do come out and win this game, well, there's your answer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or at least the start of your answer. You know, but this will be your true test. If you can overcome this test, then you're quite well on your way if all the pieces stay together. But I have a feeling that it's not going to, and you know, we'll see. I mean, if I had to look at some isolated things on the Rams side, I think the defensive line is the key for Belichick to keep in check. I think you're going to see a lot of trap plays on those guys. I think you're going to see a lot of trap plays with Gronkowski coming back in there, and Devin, the fullback, to handle Donald and Sue. And if you keep those two guys in check, Brady will pick apart that secondary, and they'll go to zone, and he'll really pick it apart. So I mean, it's just I don't see McVay having enough bullets in the gun to handle this, and when I'm saying bullets, experience at this level. So we'll see. It'll be fun to watch. I mean, hey, God bless you. You got there, you know. Great job, great season, a lot of points, but you're about to get schooled, I think. So I may eat my words. So I may be back on your podcast in 2 weeks, and you're giving me total shit, but we'll see what happens.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us. We are out of time. We appreciate you listening to the Vegas Squares podcast, both on the website and on 12 Ounce Sports Radio. Remember, we're on 4 times a week, 12OunceSportsRadio.com. Again, we want to thank the sponsors, VGK Pop Sockets, ChaiPoker.com, Eric on the Web Productions, and Vegas Puckline Apparel, as well as, obviously, 12 Ounce, our main sponsor. Again, we appreciate you listening in. We'll catch you on the next one.